Hello and welcome to another episode of Indie Thinking here at Indie Agency News. I'm Kyle O'Brien, Managing Editor of Indie Agency News. Today we're talking not IQ, but EQ. So everyone's competing on being data-driven and strategically brilliant, but what if the indie agency industry is optimizing for the wrong type of intelligence? So I'm joined today by three leaders who've built their agencies across very different models, and let's bring them on right now. Here's everyone. We have Laura Stayt, president of Zambezi in LA, Trevor Guthrie, co-founder of Giant Spoon, New York, and Miriam Moertl, managing director at Ardmore in Belfast. Thanks for joining me so late in the day. Appreciate that, Miriam. So we're going to explore a question that could reshape how indies compete. Is emotional intelligence, EQ, actually the strategic advantage we've been missing? And Laura, I'm going to start with you as we get to the questions here. So TalentSmart research shows that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence, and EQ accounts for 58% of job success. McKinsey found leaders with empathy perform 40% higher. So Laura, your CEO says you can confidently steer the ship, and you've explicitly talked about how the value of team in all its forms became central to your leadership. So yet when you're scaling Zambezi across production, social, and media divisions, building what's now the largest female-owned agency in the US, bravo on that, you're still competing in an industry where most indie leaders position themselves on pure strategic brilliance. So when you see that disconnect between what research shows about EQ and how indie agencies actually compete for talent and clients, what's really going on?
I mean, I guess I question the idea that there really is a disconnect. Like, I just think that we continue to see the shift in what brands and partners are really looking for. You know, I think in the last couple of years in particular, we've seen just way more of this move towards indie agencies. Like, there's an increasing curiosity about, you know, what you can really get by going to an indie. And so I sort of, you know, I guess I don't even really see it as like, you know, what we are going for is, you know, you need to have technical capability, you need to have strategic brilliance. But I do think that the primary thing that can set us apart from the big network agencies is more of that EQ. And, you know, my background before coming to Zambezi was in the big network agencies, you know, agencies of 400 plus people. And I can confidently say firsthand that it's a very, very different experience. And, you know, and I think that there really has been that swing. I think it's changing. And I think that, you know, if you think about going into a pitch, for example, and now we are increasingly finding ourselves in the rooms with the big players, with the big agencies, and we're increasingly winning. And I do think that, you know, anyone can have a fight over the technical aspects or the tools or the platforms, and we can pretty confidently compete in all of that. What we can offer that's different is the people, is that emotional aspect, and is the communication and the listening that I think you really only get coming from a place where it is fostered and appreciated and developed in a way that you just don't really find in some of the bigger agencies.
Right. Trevor or Miriam, anything to add to that in terms of EQ?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, there's a disconnect between the expectation of IQ and EQ. And I don't think that's driven from the leaders, to be honest. I still think we've got a problem in the industry, in that the industry still celebrates or packages up success in the form of visible IQ. So whether it's awards or press or pitches, what people fail to realize is that you need the EQ to get to that point. So whilst I totally agree, Laura, that it should be a given, I still think the importance of it is not realized. I don't think it's given enough time and energy and conversation, and that's why it's great to be part of this panel today.
Gotcha.
I had a conversation once with the consulting group Mercer Island, and there was a question that somebody had posed in the room that I was in, and it was like sort of the difference between a holding company pitching and an independent. And there, from my like recollection, that the summary of the answer was that independents sort of pitch closer. They're like, you can, the way that they described it after having many pitches, like you can feel them in the room, you can feel them coming through the screen or into the business. And you know, in some ways, I think they're probably also referencing EQ. Like a lot of what I've witnessed, and I think is important to the success of independence, is sort of trying to get to the unspoken. And so there's the brief, and then we talk about it a lot in our business. What's the brief behind the brief? And you're trying to navigate beyond, like, around those things, and really trying to understand the business, how decisions are made, asking the right questions through that process. And so I think independents are just really good at that. Like we don't set up the first half of our meeting explaining infrastructure. We set up the first half of our meeting talking about their business. And we try. We're not always the best at it, but we try to get off our business creds into their business as quickly as possible. We're mindful of that. But I think that's like sort of part of the muscle that's in an independent agency, and why EQ is really valuable for it too.
Sure. So for indie agency leaders who think, I need to be the smartest person in the room to win against the networks, what specific business costs are they missing? So Trevor, like, you built Giant Spoon into MediaPost 24 Independent Agency of the Year. Laura, you scaled Zambezi across multiple divisions. And Miriam, from your strategy and client service lens, what does ignoring emotional dynamics actually cost an agency?
Well, for me, we always say internally in Ardmore, smart wins the argument, but if you're emotionally intelligent and switched on, you're able to read the room, that's what's going to win the business and retain it as well. I think, there's loads of detrimental outputs if you are not able to be attuned to the people in the room, the dynamic in the room. You can fall at the first hurdle. And I think that can continue as well. You see weaker client relationships, renewal rates, you're in a weaker position. Ego-heavy dynamics, clients can see through all of that. I think it's a struggle for leaders, particularly the leaders who are not new and emerging, because I think, certainly in the UK anyway, the industry has always been dominated by the founders and the leaders of agencies. And a lot of the team anyway have been kept behind the scenes, and we're just simply not set up like that in Ardmore. Everybody is in the firing line. Everybody is client facing. So we don't ever have the opportunity for any one single person to be the smartest in the room. And I think that's probably one of our strengths, and why we stand out. Everybody in that sense is equal. Gotcha.
Trevor, anything to add on the ignoring EQ?
I don't think our industry has on an IQ level. I've never been in rooms where I feel like we have an intelligence problem. The reason this industry is so fascinating is, like, you do get to interact with both at your agency and on the client side with really, really thoughtful people who understand their business and the dynamics and are asking questions. So I've always felt like the IQ of the rooms that we're fortunate to be able to be in are exceptional. The thing I think that you're always trying to figure out is, and the clients, they want a lot of things, but they definitely always want great work, and they always want business impact. Like, they want those things. They're not, like, against those. I think what you're often trying to figure out is, like, the complexities on their side of the table, like what's going on in their organization, what outside external pressures are there, like what maybe historical baggage could be within it, for things they've done in the past that maybe they have preconceived notions on stuff. So you're always trying to figure out, like, how do you help them get to that work? How do you help them navigate to actually seeing what they want to get out into the world?
Right. Laura, anything to add?
No, I think that's all. That's all great. I think that when we think about more of the internal dynamics as well, I think that's just really the other aspect of the development. The development of our people and the development of the EQ kind of muscle and sort of what that looks like. And I think it can look really different for every agency, because every agency is slightly different. But when I think about like business cost, I think about it through that lens as well. And ultimately, the hiring of the best people, the retention of the best people, and feeling like there are sort of the development opportunities on that front. Because again, I think when you really look at sort of official definitions of what is IQ versus EQ. Like IQ exists, EQ can be sort of learned. And I think that, it is something that we try and focus on. And it's less about kind of specific frameworks and kind of like, like formal ways of handling it. But there's things that we do that I think are more unique to an indie, because we have more control over the systems and the processes and the ways that we choose to train people, that ultimately I do lead to, great retention and great productivity and satisfaction of the people that are working in our agencies. And, and I look at it as like, there are things there's tools and there's things that we can give to people. Like we have, great career coaches. We set up various things that can give people opportunities to learn. But I do think that a lot of it is also just in modeling the behavior, as the leaders of the agencies. Like, what do we want people to see? Like, who are we trying to be and how are we showing up? And I think that's people learn through osmosis, and through that, that's where like the mentorship and the close relationships that we have with our people become, so important. And if you're to break down kind of what are the key elements of EQ, like the self-management, the self-regulation, the self-awareness, it's just so important. And I think that, there's often this sort of misconception that so much of it is about like, how emotional are you? Like how vulnerable are you being? And I think that there's really just a balance as leaders that is an important thing to model, of like that self-regulation and being in control, but at the same time being able to show up as a human, have empathy, listen to people, and the listening part is really crucial, and understanding kind of what it is that they need on both a personal and professional level. Like, those are the people who do feel listened to, who felt heard, who feel like they're being developed in that way. Those are the people who are going to stay. And those are the people who are going to continue to contribute to your business. And again, I think that cost is vital. And that's where we really can set ourselves apart, of keeping and retaining those brilliant people, that they're not going to want to go elsewhere. So to me, like, as we think about business costs, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk a bit about agency models. So Miriam, you've said that you couldn't get the two things aligned early on, the knowledge and the technical skills versus effective leadership. What's the framework that helped you develop EQ? And Trevor and Laura, and how do you think about developing emotional intelligence across different agency models, like experiential versus integrated versus strategy focused?
Yeah. Well, I suppose to piggyback on what Laura said there, we wouldn't have a framework as such. I mean, we all talk about, for starts, emotional intelligence is an everyday language for us in the agency, which has been a big shift over the last few years. We're all aware of, I suppose, the different areas of emotional intelligence that we need to lean into. So the awareness, like Laura said, regulating your emotions, the empathy, and I suppose the agility to be able to act on that. It's an intentional area of training for us in conversation and development. And yes, it changes across the different areas within the agency for sure. The needs of a creative person in the emotional awareness and intelligence space is very different to someone in client servicing who's probably more readily wanting to lean into that space. Mm-hmm. But the principles remain. And I think the fact that we're an integrated agency, there's 52 of us, we work alongside one another every single day. Hierarchy, there is none in that respect at all. Everybody of different levels are in the room together. And I think that's massive as well. And that really does foster from the outset, from placement students, interns, that psychological safety. And everybody feels safe, I would like to think, to say what they want and to ask those questions, be curious, challenge. And that's the foundation for us, regardless of what area of the business you work in. That's the foundation from which we build and we foster that psychologically safety and emotional intelligence. What I would say, one recommendation, and we have many dog-eared copies across the agency, there's a book that Bruce Patton wrote, Difficult Conversations, and short of me giving it to somebody as soon as they join the agency, pretty soon after they join, I'll pass them a copy, because I was given it 10 years ago and it completely reshaped how I approach people management and leaning into that space. So that's one tool, not a framework, but it's a tool that we really do leverage.
Yeah, I think Miriam, like I completely echo what you're saying about the safety aspect is just so critical of like people feeling like they can be authentically who they are, but again, both professionally and personally, without fear of retribution, without and I think that's key. But the other thing you said that I completely agree with is the integration part. And again, I think this is where we have an advantage. As we've grown we started as a creative business, we built a media business, we built a production business, all actually very different types of people, very different capabilities. I think a big shift that we've had in the last few years is really just trying to make sure that there's no divisions between these groups of people. Like everybody truly is working together, and I think sort of forcing that integration across different levels, so that what people have, I think far sooner in their careers is exposure to those different personalities, different ways of working, and then different things that people need. Whereas again, I feel like in very, very big agencies, it's like you can become an absolute expert in how to lead and talk to your account group or your strategy group or whatever it is, but not necessarily kind of building those muscles across divisionally, across very different types of people. I would say also that the three of us, Ardmore, Giant Spoon, and Zambezi are all part of worldwide partners, a global network of agencies where, again, you have access to all of this perspective. And it's very humbling when you're working with and talking to people across the world with very different kind of capabilities and ways of working culturally as well. That, again, I think that you just, that sense of perspective and different types of people that you work with, learning that sooner versus when you get to that leadership level is ultimately going to help foster that as people kind of move through their careers within indie agencies.
Right.
We share very similar notes too on the integration piece, where like from the founding of this agency at Giant Spoon, we've had creative, media, strategy, experiential sort of sitting together. One of the things we noticed really early on was that we would use language or words, and the other groups maybe had a different interpretation of it. So the creative team would say platform, and I think we all know what they mean, but the media team would say platform and they mean meta, or they just mean different things.
Right.
And so we ended up building like a thesaurus that's called Speaking Spoon. And we took all the leads from every department and ended up sort of like writing out, okay, here's what a platform is for a producer, here's what a platform is for this, or here's what ROAS means. And we found that to be like a really helpful, like unifying element for how we like integrate our teams and like get them to understand those pieces of it. So it sounds super simple, but it was really impactful for us to get everybody on the same page.
Man, I could have used one of those when I first started in the industry.
Yeah, I think we need to steal it as well, Trevor.
I know, that's fantastic. So, all right, Laura, when you're in the room with CMOs evaluating Zambezi against network agencies, how does emotional intelligence show up as a differentiator, and what should clients be looking for in agency leadership that goes beyond the credentials and case studies we all bring to the table?
I mean, I think a couple of people said it already. It's so much of it is about listening and about talking about them and truly understanding what it is that they need. It's far less about us, and it's far more about them. And I think you can be, on paper, a great salesperson in a pitch, right? But if what you're doing is you're there to talk about yourself and you're there to talk about the company, I've seen it many, many times in my career where you're talking past what they're really trying to say, and it's creating the space for real conversation and real communication. And I think that again, when you're in an indie of the size that this group all are, you're showing up ultimately with the people who are very dedicated to your business. They deeply care about your business, whether it's in a pitch or whatever it is. These are people who understand you and your brand and deeply are invested in the outcome of that. And again, I think that is a differentiator, that for us, the importance of that brand partnership is not insignificant. Like, we are so deeply invested in the success of that brand, of that work, of whatever it is. that, and I think that they can feel that. I think that CMOs can really feel the care that goes into whatever it is, whether it's a piece of strategy or a piece, a media plan, production that comes through the studio, whatever that is. Again, I think that's the dedication to the success of that ultimately makes a difference. And, when we're bringing people into the company, when we're hiring, we really look for like a certain kind of mindset that we believe that sort of lean in, that proactivity, that deep kind of care to understand what's really going on. I think that it just goes so much beyond the vendor kind of relationship that I do think that in sort of larger network agencies you find more typically. And I think the CMO also knows they can probably pick up the phone to any of us at any time of day or night, and we'll be there. And I think that's a pretty big point of differentiation.
Definitely. So let's, we have one more question before we go to some quick hits, but this is for all of you. So what's the moment when you'll know emotional intelligence has fundamentally changed how the indie agency positions itself against the networks? And what should agency leaders across all disciplines be preparing for right now?
Well, for me, and we've touched on it, and hopefully it comes through in this panel, it's when EQ stops being a leadership trait and is just, I suppose, an agency value proposition. I would like to think that all of us within our agencies and everyone within the agencies operate that way, but I know from peer agencies that isn't the case. For a start, yes, of course, it has to come from the leaders of the agency, but it shouldn't stop there. People should be arriving at the agency really with either those skills already developed, or if they're new on their career journey, wanting to lean in and be warm and open to behaving that way. So that's a big one for me. And also here in the UK and Ireland, we only experience this when we pitch at a more international level, when chemistry is a fundamental measurable. And not just stage one, you get through or you don't. We would love for that read on an agency to continue through the process, because everyone can deliver technically and you can get it right or wrong on the day, but we fundamentally feel as a group of people, Ardmore, clients are within our DNA, and it's how John Keane, the CEO, built the agency. So we would love for that to shine through a little bit more readily here over in the UK and Ireland. Great.
Laura or Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that there's, I don't know whether there'll be a moment where it sort of fundamentally shows up, but again, I feel like we're just seeing the trends of things. It was when more business starts to go kind of towards the indies, when we're starting to see the retention of people, when we're starting to see people making a choice in their career of where they want to go and stay. I think that those are just all the key indicators of the health of that. That I think I see it more as just a kind of a shift over time versus there being a moment. There will always be a place for the massive agencies and the big network agencies. Like they're not going to go away, and they will be needed for certain things. But again, I think then it's just more of this shift of like with different kinds of brands and sort of steady growth that I think we're going to start sort of understanding that we are being successful in that, because that's where people want to work and it's where brands want to go.
Sure.
I think you see it in some of the bigger agencies right now, and you certainly see it with us, but this idea of integration is a big part of this. Miriam, you mentioned like the chemistry, like you can feel it in a room. Like you can definitely feel when a creative team has worked with a media team, and there's that like mutual respect across the relationship, and there's natural idea builds that happened. Or I was in a pitch recently and I came out with my team and it looked like a perfect passed basketball game. Like there was like just every moment the ball was moving to the right place to build the ideas to get to the point. And they were flawless at it. And they like knew each other and knew where to be on the court. And I was really proud of them. Like it was this idea of like knowing with their role in that room and sort of where to come at it from. So to me, it's also driven by the clients. Like clients want that. They want simplicity in their responses. They want the agencies to integrate faster. Like as AI and data become part of it, it's how do you take those insights and those notes and move it to action more quickly. So I think we'll continue to see that, but I think there's all, maybe Kyle, to your question is, I imagine, and I've started to see a little bit, is like you're going to see more clients demanding integrated offerings. Yeah. And I think we see it in a lot of the RFPs that are coming out from clients right now.
Excellent. And I do love a good basketball reference. So, all right. So these are just one sentence answers for here. So just get prepared to be witty in one sentence. So what's the biggest lie indie agencies tell themselves about why being strategically smart is enough?
I mean, I think we tell ourselves that like the client ultimately is buying an idea, and they're often not. They're buying a lot more than that. That's like 2 sentences. Is that all right?
That's all right. Well, we'll change it with the grammar. So I mean, with the punctuation. Right. Trevor,
Laura, I tend to agree with you, but I also think I fool myself telling people that they bought a better idea somewhere else, but I think they bought people somewhere else. Like I think that's probably the truth of it.
Interesting. Okay, so if you could only hire for technical brilliance or emotional intelligence, which actually wins more business?
I don't think there's like one way to I think it totally depends, like, which is a non-answer. But like if you're hiring for your data analytics team in the media department, technical skills are probably a bit more important than, versus like the account team. So I would say as a very broad statement, if you were to like weigh it like percentage wise as a totality of an agency, probably like the EQ is ultimately what's going to do more. But I do think that there is still like per role, there's still places where the IQ and the technical standpoint has to come first.
Gotcha. All right. We have time for one more quick one. One thing every indie agency leader should stop doing immediately that's destroying their competitive advantage. One sentence. One word.
Don't let ego get in the way. Indie agencies don't need to have an ego.
Perfect.
We're authentic and genuine enough.
Trevor?
Always roll up your sleeves. Like as an indie, you're in the work, you're not above the work.
Perfect. Laura?
I think it's, I would say, just not losing sight of the real value that you bring, and trying to compete on the wrong things.
Excellent. We could talk about this all day. This is definitely ripe for another conversation. But Trevor, Laura, Miriam, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us about this. And thanks to everyone who tuned in for Indie Thinking live here. And we appreciate you. Don't go away. We're just going to end the stream here.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.